It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. And before I get into my rant, thank you for coming and listening to the show. And I actually didn't plan to make this. I'm recording really late at night, and I'm a little jacked up. And I guess, one of my first thoughts is, America, what the fuck is wrong with you? Just so fucking frustrating. Two things that are on my mind. One is I was just watching the news and interviews with a lot of Republican leaders where they're being asked if they think there's any racism or systematic racism in the United States, and they're all saying no. Really? I guess they've never left their gilded cages and not been out in reality, because it can be bad. It exists, and I can't go into details of how I know this, but I've been involved with people where they can't get a job because they have a criminal record. And I fucking hate that. I hate that with a passion, because not to mention the fact that the legal system already fucks certain people harder than other people. But once you've paid your time, you're still penalized. But that should be illegal. I've also come to find out that some people, or some places, I guess, some companies won't let you buy or rent an apartment, I guess, if you have a criminal record. And so you get out of jail, which was bullshit probably in the first place, and this whole system is more difficult for one group of people than another group of people, so it's unfair to start with. And then you come out, and you might have a parole officer, and you can't get a job, or it's a lot harder to get a job. It's harder to get a good job. You got all kinds of expenses and bills to pay. It's really fucking hard to find a place to live. And no, it's not me. I'm fine. Really. But I sometimes I think about other people and how they're getting treated, and it pisses me off. The other thing that set me off is one of my clients who has a fund, an investment called a business development company. Now, I know I talked about this probably 4 or 5 years ago when they first hired me, because these things are potentially horrible. How's that? Likely horrible, I even say. I can't say guaranteed horrible, but this client, I can't tell you anything about the client, of course, invested $75,000 in this at 7,500 shares at $10 a piece. And because of the way the rules are written, this company doesn't have to follow the standard accounting procedures and reporting what they're worth on a daily basis, monthly basis, or even a fucking quarterly basis. And when they put out a number, it's just whatever they say. It's privately traded. And if you want to get out, once you get in, getting in is easy. They'll take your money. Everyone takes your money. Getting your money back is really difficult. And we haven't been able to get the money back. Well, this company and another company just merged together, and they're going to launch a bigger, better business development company fund. And so all of the different corporations and private LLCs and all the shit that they've made are all getting combined to one, and it's going to be publicly traded. And I think that means I can get out. I think that means for my client, I can now sell their investment in this. And I'm trying to pull this up now. Here we go. As of today, their investment is worth $43,300. They invested $75,000 7 years ago. They were getting 8 to 10% dividend every year but the dividend was paid in additional shares. Additional shares. So they started out with 7,500 shares, and now they have almost 12,000 shares. So one could look at that and go, I keep getting more shares. And if they're worth $10 a piece, your $75,000 investment looks like it became a $120,000 investment. But it didn't. It became a $43,000 investment, which means this person is going to get 57% of their money back, which actually at this point, I'm actually kind of excited about that. I figured getting half would be a surprise. Getting 58% of the money back, in a way, I'm delighted. But it's just so frustrating because the person that sold this, I'm not going to give you their name, but they worked at, I don't know if they still do because this was years ago, they worked at LPL Financial. And they're a certified financial planner. And they're supposed to be one of the good guys, I guess. So overused. And put your money into something that might have been pitched as low risk, and it wasn't. That's not how these things work. That you're going to get 7 or 8 or 9% a year. You're going to make stock market-like returns with bond-like risk profile. That's not true. It's not true. Now, I don't know if this person actually knew what they were selling, or if they went to some seminar and found out they could make a whole bunch of money selling these things, and they were told the buzzwords to say and the sequence to say them in a little pamphlet to read off of. But whatever. They sold $75,000 of this one thing to this one person, and they probably got a big fat 10% commission, $7,500 out of it, would be my guess, 10% on something like this. And it sat there and it sat there and it sat there. We couldn't get out. We couldn't trade it. Even when you ask for the money, they say you can get the money out, but you can't. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. And now we find out, without any input or control on our part, that we're going to get $43,300. And it's not even my money, and I'm pissed. This is one of those things like sometimes people will say, I'm going to put $10,000 in this. If I lose it all, I don't care. What the fuck is that? or someone will say, I have money I can afford to lose. I don't. I work hard. I work for all the money that I have. I don't have any money that I can afford to lose. I still get verklempt when I have to pay $20 more than I think I should for my fucking cell phone bill. But I guess maybe that's just the cranky old man in me coming out. But, one of the philosophies is that how you get money is by not spending money and watching where it goes. And here's a case where if invested in the stock market, the $75,000 today easily could be worth $150,000. I haven't actually pulled up the dates and checked. Maybe it'd be $200,000. But it's not. It's $43,000. And to make it just one little bit worse, I guess, it's all in an IRA. And the reason I say it's worse is because if it was in a taxable account, you could claim that you bought it for $75,000 and sold it for $43,000 and have a $32,000 loss and take a tax deduction on that. But because it's inside of an IRA, you don't even get that. But they got 58% of their money back. They're going to get 58% of their money back. Anyway, just some things that I had to get off my chest. I think I'll still have a regular Investing Skeptically segment, and maybe, because I haven't recorded it yet, maybe it'll be on business development companies. I got to look. I think I did this, but it's been years. Maybe I can refresh that. And then we'll have an interview, something completely and totally different. We're going to talk to Peter Montoya, who's working on a new way to have people connect without religion being involved. And that'll be a much funner conversation, but I just really had to sit down and do this while I was so pissed off. So please forgive me for being ranty. I thank you, and enjoy the rest of the show.
I'm not worried about dying because I'm an atheist, right? Now, I know that this is a Christian country and I stand up for your right to be religious, but please know that you're wrong, right? Please know that you're living in a fantasy land and that after you die, nothing happens. Stop being a fucking child, right? Like, I'm not scared of dying because I'm an atheist. I know I'll just rot in the ground, right? I won't even know I'm dead. Do you want to know why? Because I'll be fucking dead. Religious people worry because they believe in heaven. If there's a heaven, there has to be a hell. And everyone who's read that book knows that you've done enough shit to go to hell, right? And that makes it very stressful on your deathbed, doesn't it? Knowing what a prick you are, going, oh, this isn't going to be good. Hey? I don't want to go to heaven. I don't even want the option of heaven. I don't want to exist in a conscious state for the rest of eternity constantly thinking. I don't like thinking as it is. Where's me passport? Can't punch women in the face. The Bible calls heaven eternal bliss. I don't care how blissful it is. It's eternal. You'll get used to it, and then you'll be fucking bored. And what's hell meant to be like? Fire and brimstone and eternal agony? That's what's written in the Bible. That's God's book. As far as I know, the devil hasn't brought out a book. We don't know his side of the argument, right? If you ask me, the devil and God are having an argument. The devil's being a bigger fucking man. Because God's just writing shit about him. And the devil's going, I'm not even going to fucking comment, son, if you talk about me like that.
This Investing Skeptically segment is on business development companies. And it goes with the intro of this show where I had my little rant. And I think I'm mostly over the rant, but I wanted to give you a little bit more detail. These are kinds of companies that were created by Congress in around, I think it's 1980. Actually, yes, 1980. I'm looking at Investopedia, business development company. So if you want to go learn more, there are things there. And a business development company can be either publicly traded or not publicly traded. I call the ones that are not publicly traded private placement. So there's private placement REITs, there's private placement business development companies. I don't know that that's a actual legal significant term. It's just what I use, I think, but I'll have to look into that. But what I mean by that is that you can't just go and buy shares in it. Someone has to sell them to you. So you might have an advisor who may or may not be acting in your best interest, or may think that they're acting in your best interest, recommend that some of your portfolio go into one of these. And as it describes in Investopedia, the basic idea is that this is a company, a fund, that has a limited number of shares, so it's considered to be closed end. Most mutual funds, you send them the money, they buy more shares, and when you want your money out, they sell stuff, or they have a little bit of cash on hand, and they send you back your money. Well, with a BDC, business development company, you have to have someone else buy the shares from you. So you can't just say, I want my money out. You have to actually sell your shares to somebody else. They may actually continue to sell shares or issue more shares in the future, which can be problematic because their clarity, their accuracy in reporting what they're worth is dicey. And I'll get into why here, because it's what they invest the money into. So the purpose originally, according to Congress, at least as reported in Investopedia, was to create a source of funds for very small companies in the United States of America. My understanding is that at least 70% of the money must go into companies, U.S. companies, that have a market value of less than $250 million. So they can go in and buy shares, they can do a loan, they can buy bonds from this company, they might get on the board of directors, and they can take a more active role in some cases in one of these companies and provide the cash flow that they need. And it sounds like a wonderful idea. And the thing is that this is a very risky idea. This is a very risky thing to do. So it's not inherently bad conceptually. It's always about implementation and, you know, who's doing this work and do they have a track record. I still prefer index funds way above something like this, but, you know, it's not inherently bad by design, by nature. it just can be very, I guess, risky. I don't know if I have a better word for that. Some of these funds will claim or actually pay out really high dividends, 8, 10, 12, even 14%. And again, as I've talked about many times on this show, when the interest rate market is 1 or 2 or 3%, if somebody's paying you 10%, you should assume that it has a whole lot more risk. The fund or the company that you invest in can also make money by having the assets that it owns go up in value. Of course, one of the problems is a lot of times the companies that they're investing in are not publicly traded themselves, or they're thinly traded because they're very small companies. And so getting an accurate calculation of how much your investment is worth can be difficult. And again, as I'm looking on Investopedia, they have some pros and cons. The pros that they list are high yields, which, okay, if they're paid out and if the price that you can get for your shares doesn't go down, that's cool. It's open to retail investors. This actually is a lot like a venture capital investment, but available to most anybody. Venture capital usually requires that you be a qualified investor, which means you have either a generally high income or a portfolio of $1 million or $2 million. I can't remember what the rule for that was. It's not something that I concern myself with, because generally, for me, if it means it requires a qualified investor, it's a risky investment, and I'm not really that into those kind of things. And one of the other downsides is that the price can change dramatically. I mentioned that because it's hard to value. In the one that I talked about in the opening segment, it was actually, and you can Google it yourself, it's called FS Investment Corp 2. At least it was called that. It now is FSKR, I think, is what it became. And it had a regular non-reporting of what they thought it was worth. Now, the person that I talked to bought a bunch of shares at $10 a piece. And sometimes this organization would report a price at $9.20, $8. Okay. And sometimes they paid dividends, which then got reinvested. Maybe there was a way to select for the dividends to not be reinvested. I'm not sure of that. That was the way it was set up for the client that I helped. And I didn't help them buy this. I was trying to help them get out of it. One of the other downsides is ones that are publicly traded are liquid, and you can buy and sell them anytime during the day like a stock. But if it's a private placement, business development corporation, it is not publicly traded. You have to go out on your own and find someone to buy the shares from you, or you can redeem them with the company. But just like with private placement REITs, they often have very complicated and twisted rules for how you can get the money out. And it might limit it to something like only 2% of all money in any given quarter can be removed from the fund and given back to investors. So there's a form that you have to fill out. There's a certain date that you have to request your money by, usually weeks or months in advance. It might be twice a year. It might be once a year. It might be every calendar quarter. And they might give you your money back based on the date that you applied. It might be a random draw. It might be an allocation based on all the people that asked for the money. So if it's not publicly traded, it can be very difficult to get the money out. Matter of fact, the one that I was specifically talking about, its share price had gone down into the 7s, but third-party transactions were around $5 a share when the theoretical value of the stock was $10. So if you wanted your money out quickly, you would get about half of it back. And ideally for me, most investments are long-term, so that may not really be a problem for you. But what I don't like is the hiddenness, the hidden nature of it all, that you give them the money, they may or may not report what it's worth. At least if it's publicly traded, if you want the money out, you can get a trade during the day. You can get your money out if you need it for some reason. I really do like that, having that ability. So, that's just some things about private private placement? No. Yeah, private placement business development companies and business development companies in general. And the one that I was talking about, it merged with a bunch of other business development companies and went public and issued shares on the New York Stock Exchange, I think it was, which allowed me to immediately sell it. And so I'm out of that, or at least my client is out of that, getting slightly more than half of their money back after 6 or 7 years of investment. So a very, very unfortunate chain of events that led to not only a loss in the relative sense of, a certain amount of money was put in and about half was able to take out, but during that 6 or 7 years of ownership, the market went up, 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 and they got nothing. Well, they got negative. They could have made positive, but instead they made negative. So if you don't understand something that you're investing in, don't invest in it. And like I've said many times before, if you don't understand it, you can research it. You can ask me. You can send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and I can try to look into it if I can find the time. Or maybe it's something I already know some basic ideas about. But there's plenty of money to be made in stock index funds and bond index funds. They behave in a certain way while they still have considerable volatility. You can plan short-term more bonds, long-term more stocks, and you can kind of sort of have an idea where it's going to go, even though that may not work out. But something like this, you give somebody your money, and they do what they do with it, and you get what you get. And it may be a profit, it may not be a profit. In this case, the fund, I think, was paying something like 10+% dividend, but the dividends were being reinvested. So my client went from 7,500 shares to almost 12,000 shares, but still lost almost half of their money. So again, that's business development companies. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody. As promised, next I have a very special guest, Peter Montoya. How are you, sir?
Phil, I'm doing great. So glad to be here.
I am honored to have you. And for listeners who don't know, you used to help people like me run investment advisor businesses, RIAs, and other kinds, and you would help them market and focus and try to get clients. Is that correct?
Yeah. About 15 years ago, I wrote a book called The Brand Called You, which was on personal branding. And then I did, 2,000 keynote presentation and training presentations, largely for independent financial advisors, and helping them build a brand and attract more clients.
How does one get started in that?
Oh, gosh. It's kind of like the same thing. If you ever want to become a congressman, you kind of begin working out as a congressional aide or something like that. You kind of learn the ropes. Yeah. So my first job, I got a degree in political science, and when you have a degree in political science, you've got like 3 choices. Yeah. You can go to law school, but I had ADHD and just didn't have the discipline. You can go into sales, number 2, and third option is you can become a bartender. Yeah. So I chose sales, and I went to work for a really big motivational speaker, and where you kind of learning the marketing and the branding and the sales, and also content development.
And if I recall correctly, that's Peter Robbins. Is that?
Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins.
I knew I had the first name wrong. Tony Robbins. Yeah, I do know who he is. I have some thoughts on him that I'm not going to share with you yet, at least. But
one of the reasons I don't come right out and say his name is I don't want to be too closely associated with him.
I actually heard that in another interview. What do you think stylistically? Because I don't want to get into personal stuff, but stylistically, how are you different?
Broadly speaking, the personal development industry for like the last 100 years or so has been based around the prosperity doctrine.
Yeah.
Which we all know is kind of a lie. I mean, everyone knows that success doesn't equal happiness, but that if you look at either Earl Nightingale or Think and Grow Rich or As a Man Thinketh, those are all based in the prosperity doctrine, which is the whole idea: you'll make more money, you'll be happier; you'll make more money, you'll get to heaven; you'll make more money, and you're showing the blessings of God or whatever it might be. And I think that is fundamentally flawed. So I don't like the promotional nature, the oversized stature, the focus on hype. It's just not my style. I'm much more about flourishing and thriving and living a life of well-being.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that, because one of my favorite books and one of my personal philosophies is the book. The book is titled Enough, and it's written by John Bogle, the founder of the Vanguard Mutual Fund Company, where he goes on some quite lengthy rants about, once you get enough, what do you need more for? And if you're making more, which is great, but if you're hurting other people, taking other people down to do it, it's now a net negative to society, and you should knock that shit off.
Yeah.
So, I really like that idea. So that's...
And unfortunately, John wrote that book in June 1, 2010, and in the last 10 years, it's only gotten increasingly worse since then.
No doubt about it. And I normally give listeners a list of 4 books that I recommend that they read to be able to either understand my system or to be able to go and do investments on their own. And of course, I don't know how many shows you might have listened to, but everything that I do, I detail on my podcast all for free. It's not a switch and bait and hook.
Bait switch.
Yeah, I can't do English today. Good thing. Too much Italian. But it's all there. I'm surprised anyone hires me, quite frankly. But people will call me up and they say, "Yeah, I love everything that you do. I'm just not going to do it." Mm-hmm. And that's my target audience, I guess, is the people who like my strategy and philosophy, but they're just not going to do it. But the advisors you helped, what were some of the biggest roadblocks, and maybe roadblocks they created for themselves?
Oh, that's a great question. So overall, most financial advisors are better salespeople and customer service people than they are business people.
Yeah.
And they're fairly short-sighted. Their sales horizon is maybe 30 or maybe 60 days. And so they're always looking out to eat what they kill. Yeah. And that's a very, very taxing, tiring model. So good advisors start thinking about 180 days, 6 months, or a year in advance, and they start doing long-term things strategically through building a brand, picking a target market and specializing themselves, building a relationship, built a marketing model. So they're not just taking little bits of business to pay the bills, but they're actually starting to attract the clients they want to attract, repel the ones they don't, and they're much more strategic and long-thinking rather than this kind of perpetual eat what you kill sales model.
Yeah. And I like that. And it sounds pretty sound. And I'd like to think that, I'd like to claim that that's what I did, but I kind of stumbled over my own 2 feet to get where I am. Years ago, I started sponsoring atheist conventions, and we can talk about religion or lack thereof. And it turns out that no financial planner in their right fucking mind is going to market to secular humanists, atheist free thinkers, because they're terrified of losing their local base. Because a lot of the advisors, I'm assuming you can confirm this, a lot of advisors appeal or pitch to religious people.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, there were a ton of them in financial services. And my wife is devoutly religious. She's Christian. And I go with her oftentimes to these very high-end Christian conferences. And I'll be sitting down at a table with 8 other people, and almost always there's 1 or 2 people who know me because I'm so well known in financial services, know me at the table because they're financial advisors and they're also Christians. My wife has always got a big chuckle out of that.
That's nice. I have had a few listeners call me the anti-Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because I mean, I'm kind of using the same thing that he does, and I'm using the same thing that a lot of these Christian guys do. I speak and behave in a certain way. I don't do it intentionally. That's just the way I am. But I don't sugarcoat any of it. But I do specifically appeal to the non-believers, and no one else wants to play. So
that's exactly right. So one of the best lessons I teach financial advisors: if you want to build a brand, you have to repel if you want to attract. You got to turn off in order to turn on, and you certainly have taken that lesson to heart, whether you knew it, you were doing it or not.
Well, it's funny because for the most of I've been doing this about 24 years, probably 15 of them, I was just small. And it was a friend of a friend, a referral here, a referral there, just very small thing on the side because I had a big fat day job. And I also used to DJ weddings. I don't know if you knew that, but did that for 20 plus years. And with the DJ business, it was a very much push-pull kind of salesy thingy. I don't really want to call it a sales pitch because I don't. But I mean, at some point I am selling me, and anyone that listens and calls, at some point I have to do that whether I meant to or not. But with the DJ thing, like for example, someone would call up, a young gentleman would call up and he'd say, "What's your price?" I say, "Well, what's the date of your wedding?" And he says, "Dude, what's the price? I just want to know the price." And I go, "Okay, let me guess. You got one fucking job to do for the whole wedding, and you're gonna fuck it up." And they're like, "What?" And I go, "You didn't ask the style, the attitude, the equipment, the music, my experience. You don't care about any of that shit. You just want the lowest price. Well, now you're wasting your own time and you're wasting my time. Maybe we should just end the conversation here." And they're like, whoa, dude, what's going on? And so then we have that conversation about what a DJ can do and can't do, and they can make an intelligent choice. And I kind of see the same kind of thing with the advisor thing. Yeah.
I think it's a great analogy.
Well, you're so kind. Now, I know that you had this business, at least one business, that I think, did you do RIAs and then advertising after that?
No, I was never in the business of financial services, so I kind of just founded the target market in 1998, decided to put all of my chips on the table and only work with financial advisors, never have been in the business. I started as an advertising agency and also did speaking and training. And then that was in 98. And in 2006, I transformed it into a software business. The advertising business is tough because it also is one of those models where you're eating what you kill. And it's just tiring. Yeah. The software business is much better because it's scalable and it's recurring revenue. And then I sold that business in 2018 to the big software player in our market called FMG Suites in San Diego.
Okay. Very, very nice. And now, of course, that provided you sufficient income that you're probably going to be okay. We don't have to get into any kind of details, but you have a new mission, dare I call it a mission,
I do.
A new drive. And I actually heard your interview on Everyone's Agnostic.
Oh, great.
And which is probably and I figured it would be, it's the most related to this show. So shout out to them. I think we've been on each other's shows in the past, but that is fantastic. And it's called Thrive Union. Why don't you give us a breakdown on what this is?
Actually, before I do that, let me ask you my $64,000 question.
Talk to me.
Based on our current trajectory, do you think human civilization will be better off or worse off in 50 years? Based on our current trajectory, will human civilization be better or worse off in 50 years?
Humanity, you said?
Mm-hmm. Oh, human civilization.
Yeah.
Humanity and our civilization.
Yeah, I'm pedantic, so forgive me. Now, see, the thing is, based on the trajectory, that's where my mind is nitpicking. Better, quite a bit better.
Oh, good. I'm glad you said that. I get only about 10% of the people who feel that way. I'm in the 90% who are very, very concerned for the future of our species and civilization.
Actually, you might want to get a book. There's a book written by Steven Pinker.
Oh, I read it.
Okay. Where he points out, and of course he glosses over some negative things and skips some things and bends the arrow a little bit, but he goes over many, many, many examples of how society compared to 10, 20, 50, 200 years ago is so vastly better. Fingers
and for your
crossed.
readers, that book is called Enlightenment Now, and it's a very, very good book. And I was lucky enough to see Steven Pinker and Sam Harris on stage 2 years ago when Steven Pinker was on his book tour for that. And I certainly agree with that. However, I think that some of the challenges that are now ahead of us aren't reflected in the data. Most likely climate change, and also the political instability that will come from climate change and all the climate immigrants, is what they're most likely calling them. They're estimating between 500,000 and 500 million and a billion.
I was going to say 500,000. That's not. Millions to billions, starting in Bangladesh and Indonesia.
So, just to give you an idea what kind of scale that was, there were 1 million Syrian refugees, and it nearly upturned European politics. That was just 1 million.
Yeah.
Like started in 2013, 12, 13, 14. We've had upwards of 50 or 100,000 South Americans coming to the border here in California, Arizona, and Texas, and it's upended our politics here. Wait till we start seeing 500 million to a billion refugees trying to swirl around the country and around the planet.
And of course, that'll freak people out. But when the really rich white folks get hit in Miami Beach and lose their properties, that's when we're going to take it serious.
Yeah, half of Florida is going to be underwater. I don't know how they keep selling real estate down there. I don't understand that.
I've had some times where I've driven around with my GPS on in Florida. I'm like, now we're 15 feet
oh my gosh.
above sea level. And I don't know how much you know about it, but the funny thing is the problem is not going to be when the water comes up and goes above the level of the ground. The water is backing up and pushing salt water into the water table under Florida and dissolving the limestone, which makes the bedrock, which is why Florida has sinkholes and is having more than ever. So it's just going to become a more spongy sponge, and is all going to, a lot of places are going to hit and miss, fall into the earth before it becomes covered in water.
Right. I didn't know that. I'm not surprised, and I'm equally horrified. So the reason I went down this path here is the reason I'm so motivated to do what I do. It really is completely and totally against my personal ethos to leave something off better than what I found it. So I've got younger kids. They're getting a little bit older now. They're 14 and 17 now. And the whole idea of me turning over this planet to my children in 30 or 40 or 50 years, worse off than how I got to it, is really, really distressing to me. So I really wanted to be part of an organization and provide as much leadership I possibly could to solve, problems. I think the most important question we should be asking as a civilization is, how do we cooperate better to solve problems? And unfortunately, all we're currently doing, the current conversation, is just how can we bludgeon the other person so we win?
Right. Yeah, and our current news environment and cycles in media, it doesn't work well, and I don't know that we've adapted mentally to it yet. Because the United States used to have, some papers, local papers, or they had radio, and then we had TV, and it was controlled channels that were sanctioned by the government and allowed to have bandwidth if they worked in the common good. But on the internet, it's the wild fucking West. And the thing I tell people is, you can find anything on the internet, which is great. But the bad thing is that you can find anything on the internet. And no matter how crazy your pet theory is, or how psychotic your paranoia over aliens or chemtrails, you can find websites that say you're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The printing press was invented somewhere around the 1400s, and everyone thought it was going to be this kind of new age of reason and responsibility and free information. And what it basically did for 30 years is completely emptied up into the world, caused massive upheavals in politics, as it took them about 30 years to kind of figure out how to manage that new invention of the printing press. Social media came around in 2007, so we're maybe 13 years into it.
Yeah.
Between the internet, social media is having the same effect now on human civilization. So maybe we're still 10 years away from actually taming this beast in a way that it actually works for us. So yeah, I'm on social media every single day, and I really wish that I wasn't.
Yeah.
There are some good practical things about it, and I think overall it's a scourge on our democracy.
Yeah, I mean, sharing family photos and vacation photos are nice, but even just today, I saw a comment on another friend's wall where a person went on basically for a paragraph of just chaotic, unfocused mind. And I don't know if they've managed to survive their whole life living that way and how they've done it. But based on what they typed, I'm not an expert in any way whatsoever, but they seem to have some serious cognitive disabilities and an inability to understand truth from fiction and what really is going on in the world. But they can have a very loud voice doing that now.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So, the good news now is everyone has a platform. Everyone has a megaphone. Everyone has the opportunity to provide their opinion. The bad news is exactly the same.
Yeah. And so I'm going to focus us back in, although we could just wander all day, I think, and have fun with it. Thrive Union. Tell me about that.
So we are a real-world community and life school completely and totally dedicated to one thing only, and that's human well-being. So I'll ask you some more questions here. This is kind of fun. How many hours does the average human being need of good social contact to minimize their anxiety and maximize their feeling of well-being, self-esteem, and self-confidence? How many hours a day should we get?
Hours a day. 3 to 5.
Good guess. And it's 3-4 hours is right.
Woo-hoo.
All right. How many hours a day are we actually getting? How many hours or minute a day are we actually getting of good, quote unquote, good social connection? And I put the word good because it's really subjective. But it's not watching a movie. It might probably not playing video games. It probably is having some level of face-to-face contact. How much time do we actually get?
Is that now with COVID, or was this a number right before COVID? Pre-COVID. Oh, pre-COVID, It was probably under an hour.
Yes, you're exactly right. It was 41 minutes a day.
Yeah, and now it's like 10 minutes a day.
Good question. Don't know. How many hours a day is the average American, this is American, spending on screens? Screens qualifies as a computer at work or a computer at home, television, tablet, phone. How many hours a day are we on our screens?
Well, assuming you don't get the recommended 7 to 8 hours of sleep and you're only getting 6, we got to take that out. An hour in bed, checking news when you get up, at work. 10 to 12?
Oh, you're good, Phil. 11 hours a day. Yeah. So we need 3 to 4 hours of human contact. We're getting 41 minutes, and we're blowing another 11 hours a day on screens. So, screens are really hurting our levels of self-confidence, of overall well-being, is dramatically increasing anxiety, and all of what they call the diseases of depression, diseases of desperation are all on the rise. The Thrive Union is meant to be a place without dogmatic religion where people can connect, develop relationships, and work together to both improve themselves and humanity.
I'm sure at this point someone has brought up, and maybe they haven't. Are you familiar with Sunday Assembly?
Of course, yeah. I was part of a Sunday Assembly chapter here in Orange County.
Excellent. I gave a, I think I was in Orange County when I went on a speaking tour a couple years ago in California and gave like 10 talks in 15 days, which, by the way, that's too much, especially when you have to drive from LA to San Francisco and back, because it looks like it's this far on the map, but it's a long way.
A long ways.
So how would you compare and contrast what you're doing to Sunday Assembly?
So I really liked Sunday Assembly, got a lot out of it being there. The challenges with Sunday Assembly was, number one, it was only once a month, and it's really hard to build connections and relationships unless you're seeing everybody at least once a week. So that was one problem. Number two, I wanted a place where we could get both believers and non-believers, and Thrive Union has an equal split between believers and non-believers. What I discovered is as soon as you put anything on there about being secular, you put the word secular on your organization, or you say we're not religious, but many of our members are, or anything as benign as that, as soon as you put that up there, that is kryptonite to any kind of believer, and they won't join.
So this is one of those weird things with semantics, because, correct me if I'm wrong, from a denotative definition, a dictionary definition, Thrive Union is secular because it doesn't have a position on religion for or against, or any specific religion. You just don't mention it.
Correct.
You focus on what you do, which is great, because one of the biggest heartburns I often have with atheist organizations is that it's comprised simply of people saying not, and that's not enough.
That is a really great topic. I spent a lot of time thinking about that one, and I don't know if I've ever had the opportunity to share these ideas with somebody. So, I listen to the Atheist Experience. I get that, obviously, that I listen to Sid Andrews, and I love, reading articles and things like that. And there really is a fiery attraction to a lot of atheistic content. So I really understand that. However, when you start going to those meetings where they're atheists, besides griping and feeling the sense of righteousness and this kind of intellectual arrogance you can kind of get a high on, there's not much farther to go. So after a couple of meetings, you kind of have those highs, and it really is a lot of fun. But I think, this is my personal opinion, I'm sure someone's going to scour me for this one here, I really think that atheism is a fairly poor organizational thought process for an ongoing, thriving community.
Oh, absolutely, because atheism doesn't, I think this is the right word, it doesn't posit anything. It doesn't claim anything other than on one specific topic, you haven't convinced me of it. And so I remember that, 10, 12, 14, maybe 15 years ago when I started going to conferences, and I went to a skeptic conference or two and had great fun. And then I went to my first really big atheist conference, and holy shit, there are some atheists with crazy cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs ideas. And just because you figured out the religion thing doesn't mean you figured out anything else.
So that's another strange thing about atheists is a lot of atheists are fairly isolated.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who are atheists were the ones who kind of didn't fall in with the Christians when they were in high school, end up kind of being isolated and lonely unto themselves, and kind of have developed, being out of social systems. So oftentimes they have no one to kind of correct them and say, that's a crazy idea. No, that's not right. And they basically have built enough of themselves up. They don't need other people, and they don't mind having crazy ideas. So, and that's the other problem with atheism is they're kind of tough to build a community around. Because I don't know how to be in community that well.
I think you were almost describing me there until you got to the crazy ideas. Hopefully I don't have too many of those. But I'm trying to be well-rounded in skepticism. And I think one of the things I heard you talk about, and maybe you didn't say it, I'll just give you the credit for it. It is so refreshing and sometimes rare for people to change their position on something.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's, so oftentimes we criticize people who change their minds. We go, oh, you used to think this, and now you think this. Ha, 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 you're a hypocrite. And no, I celebrate those people. That is something to be absolutely congratulated and loved. So, I have absolutely no loyalty to my own opinions, none. Every single bit of knowledge I've got is temporary, pending new information. And I love changing my mind about stuff. It's absolutely magical to me to come up with a new position and be in a new spot.
Well, if you don't mind playing along, your chance to answer a question. What is the most significant thing that you very dramatically changed your opinion on?
Couple. So I was a card-carrying Republican up until about 2003 or so. And when we invaded Iraq, I left that. That was a big one.
Yeah.
I was Christian and Catholic and Christian until my mid-20s. I changed that. Also, I was, in the most recent one, probably 2 years ago, I was really fairly anti-law enforcement. I was starting to label them in my mind as blue murderers.
Yeah.
And then I really went and did my homework. I probably watched 100 dash cam and body cam videos. And now I've got a much more moderated view on law enforcement.
Yeah. And
so
it's funny because that's so topical today. And it's a job that I wouldn't want to do. It's tough.
It's tough.
And I'm also not really cool with the phrase, it's just a few bad apples, because I know some police that it's more than a few some places. But maybe other places, everyone's trying their best. But it's definitely a job that I would not want to do. Also, I would not want to teach kindergarten.
Right. I think even law enforcement agree with this statement. I think we're asking too much of them. There's too much to do. There's stopping crime. There's crime investigation. There's social work. There's roadside rescue. I think we're probably asking a little too much of law enforcement overall. That's one problem. And if there's one thing I could change about law enforcement, I would completely eliminate the blue code of silence. So this is where I put guilt on good police officers. It's almost every single one of them knows another police officer who should be fired. And the culture is such that you can't say anything. So that is the guilt that I put on all police officers, is that blue code of silence.
Sure.
That's what's got to change, in my opinion.
Thrive Union, you said once a month isn't enough, but did I hear that you're meeting more than once a week now?
Oh, well, up until COVID, we worked. I don't think it's responsible for us to be meeting at all, so we're doing some virtual meetings. But yeah, we had one general meeting we called Thrive Sunday, in which we usually had a talk and we meditated and did like connection exercises, about an hour and a half every single Sunday. And then we had a whole smattering of different types of social activities. You know, we do picnics and parties, supper clubs, game nights, documentary and discussion nights. So yeah, we had probably 10 or 12 meetings per month that people could join into. And what I discovered with, Sunday Assembly, so, I go to a Sunday Assembly one month and I meet you there, you and I sit next to each other, we have a really great conversation. The next month you're not there. And now on the third month, the third Sunday, you are there, but I barely remember your name now.
Yeah.
It's been 2 months. And so it makes it really hard to develop a relationship when you're only seeing everybody every other month.
Yeah, it's a problem. And I know I had a free thinker group when I used to live in Champaign-Urbana. And if you have a meeting once a month, you can sometimes go 2, 3, 4 months before you see somebody because you missed a meeting, they missed a meeting. And so weekly and more, what other types of meetings did you have? What were the purposes and the results?
So I love documentaries discussion, where we watch a documentary, talk about that. That always increased empathy, and everyone loved learning about new topics. I love that. The social events were always fun. We supper club. We go to different restaurants. That was always enjoyable. And then almost every single major holiday, we would have a party as well.
And what are you doing for COVID? Are you just having Zoom meetings like everybody else?
Yeah, we're doing a Zoom meeting on Sunday. We're doing Thrive Sunday online on Sunday mornings.
Okay, and that's working out as well as you can get, I guess?
Yeah, as well as you can get. Zoom has got some pretty good features. The one I like a lot is called breakout rooms. So you can have 30 people on a general call and then break people up into room sizes of 2 or 3. So now I'm just seeing video of 3 people. You can give them discussion questions or an exercise. They can do that for 15 minutes and then come back to the main group. So that seems to work pretty well at having people allow for depth of conversation still, even though they're not a larger group.
Fair enough. So how do we solve our political problems in the United States? What do you got on that?
Oh, good God. So, if I could wave a magic wand, as much as I worry about climate change and income inequality and environmental regulations, I have a huge heart for those issues. The first thing I would do is I would probably launch a democratization platform. So I would do things to more or less fix our democracy. First of all, I would get rid of gerrymandering. And what gerrymandering allows both Republicans and Democrats to do is to pick districts with only their ideal constituent, which means they're almost all liberal or all conservative. And so now you've got a congressman or a senator who is going there, and they basically have no incentive to compromise or be moderate. And that's why you've got, 535 more or less radicals in their positions. And there's very little consensus in the middle because you have districts that are so singular in their focus. I would eliminate gerrymandering. I don't know if you've ever seen the gerrymandering map for Austin, Texas. It is bizarre. Austin, Texas is one of the most liberal places in the world, and it has 4 congressmen, 3 of them are Republicans.
Yeah, it's an insidious disease, gerrymandering, and I think it could be solved, and I don't know what the formula is, but a very simple mathematical formula that limits the amount of perimeter to the as a ratio of the square miles inside.
Right.
And so you would have some flexibility for mountain ranges, rivers, oceans, and stuff like that, but you can't make a serpent. You can't make, a swastika to get all your voters in one batch. But that's a tough nut to crack, and I think Congress could do it. They could pass a law. They could vote tomorrow. I don't know if Trump would sign it, but they could vote tomorrow and fix it. It'd be that easy.
They could. So that would be one thing I would do. I would end the Electoral College. I would end any kind of big money in politics. So those would be, the 3 right off the bat. I'd probably offer some kind of voter protection. So voters get protected. All this ID nonsense would go away. I would also make sure that we protect mail-in voting. So anybody who wants to mail-in vote can do that, and maybe automatic mail registration. So I'd fix all those democracy issues first things first, and maybe within 3 to 5 years, we would stop having these wild swings and these power battles.
Yeah.
It would certainly moderate a lot of issues.
One of my other ideas, either Democrats or Republicans could solve this on their own. Primaries. Don't go to the same states first every time. I kind of envision you go to 5 states and then 10 days later you go to 5 more. And every election cycle, a couple of years in advance, but every election cycle, you draw names out of a hat. And this is the order of the states that we're going to go see. So sometimes Iowa is first, but sometimes it's Alabama is first. And they get to have an oversized effect. And sometimes it's Idaho or California or Illinois, because Illinois, at least from presidential, pretty much ignored, because we're going to vote blue. And so nothing happens. Our voices are not heard. But if we're one of the first 5 states, at least sometimes anyway, or the second 5 states, people are going to come and schmooze people who live in my state to see what we want.
Right. I'd feel the same way too. I'm in California, so we virtually don't see anybody either. I love that idea. I don't think the politics is going to happen because the states. It's more of a state issue than it is a national issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to see that. The last change I'd love, which is really a pipe dream, it would be to change the charter of the Senate and also the election terms. So instead of giving senators the ability to get reelected every 6 years, I give them pick a term, a 12-year term, one 16-year term, and that's it. They get one term, they can't be reelected. And the mandate of the Senate is to only vote in the best long-term interest of our country. So whenever they get bills, they're not subject to lobbyists and re-election. All they have to do is make sure they're on balance to make sure they're making decisions in the best long-term interest of our country.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. Of course, you'd have to fix how they get elected in the first place. But you already outlined some of those ideas, of course, so we'd have to do that. Where do we go with Thrive? Is this going to be something that you just have one location locally, or are you going to propagate? What's the plan?
I would love to. COVID really sucked the air out of us. I don't know how we can responsibly start gathering again for a year to a year and a half. I'm having a hard time on the horizon seeing that happening. So I'm not so sure. It's going to take basically a reboot in the time, and I'm just not sure if my head's going to be there. I've gotten much heavier into leadership and organizational development. I'm now working on a book called Factor 5 Leadership, which is more, I don't say it in the book, but more or less the humanism leadership book.
Yeah.
That's what the book really is. And so that's where my head has been at while we've been in COVID. So we'll kind of see. Originally, it was to have more chapters, but I just don't know if I'm going to have the passion for it once we come out.
Yeah, it's a tough thing because, I mean, even if you had meetings and everyone had a mask and everyone was 6 feet from each other, you might only have 25% of the people, and you break a whole lot of the purpose of getting together because you can't really get together.
Right.
I mean, standing 10 feet from somebody in a warehouse, it doesn't. Yeah.
It was all about intimacy.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it makes it really, really hard. I just don't know how to fix that problem. And also, we had a lot of older members, and I cannot put them at risk. That's not something that I can do with having the top of my value chain being maximizing human well-being. I can't put them at risk like that.
I just learned from one of my clients today that an elderly parent in a nursing home has died from COVID.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
And it's one of those weird things. I actually was talking to my neighbor across the street, who I never talk to because he's a weirdo. But he came out and talked to me, and we were standing 10, 15 feet away from each other. And he asked the question, and I was like, that's a weird way to ask it. But kind of like out of the blue, he's like, do you know anyone that's actually died from COVID? And I was like, he's been giving us talking points from Fox News, and this is something you ask. And I'm guessing, when it's only 1% or a fraction of the percent of people have had COVID and only a small percentage of them die, most people don't directly know somebody that's died. But I told him, yes, I know several people that they're not necessarily personal friends, but I know who they are that have died. And he's like, what? He didn't know where to go with that because kind of like had to reboot and come back at it from a different angle. But Yeah, the fakeness of the news, and I see Republican friends who are talking about how liberals, if they could only get the truth as presented by Fox News, America would be saved.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the problem with our news bubbles right now. And I can't remember there's a cognitive bias that has something to do with proximity. So if you know somebody who's died from it, you're much more likely to be scared versus if you hear about a death on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world, it doesn't seem nearly as problematic.
Well, And one of the things I think they failed at is, and I know why they failed, because Trump's in charge. If you really want people to be concerned and take caution with COVID, we need to have personal stories. Someone has to go in a hospital with a camera and get 5 or 10 people's permission to follow their story and be there after you get to know somebody and then watch them grab for their last breath of life as they die. Because when that's meaningful, when you see, 25,000 people diagnosed today and 1,000 or 1,200 died, whatever. I can't process 1,200 people dying. I can process one person dying. So they gotta make
you're absolutely right. We as human beings are really, really bad at processing large numbers. So we hear 800 deaths a day, and it means absolutely nothing to us. My friend in New York says, he knows 11 people right now who have it, and he's had 4 friends who died. He's got the message. He feels it.
Yeah, I don't know when we're going to get it. And like you implied with the Thrive thing, it could be 6, 12, 18 months before we kind of really get to normal. And I think I was really worried at the beginning, and it kind of played out as I feared, that as Americans, there's certain issues that we have that sometimes are the biggest things that make us successful. Our arrogance, our pride, the we can do anything attitude, we're always right, never surrender, never give up. And that helps us achieve things that other nations of the world may never, ever be able to achieve. But in this case, the virus plays against all those perceived strengths, and they become weaknesses. When somebody goes, you can't tell me what to do, I'm going to go sit in a restaurant for 2 hours around a whole bunch of other people, and I'm going to be safe because I got a gun. Well, it doesn't. Oh, shit. Doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way.
Well, what else about Peter Montoya do we need to know, or do you want to share? What have we not covered?
I always love talking about my relationship with my wife because she is such a devout believer. I get so many questions about that because I'm really very ardently a non-believer, and she very ardently is a believer. And we really make our relationship work so incredibly well. And we've had tough conversations, and we unfortunately have gone too far, sometimes arguing on our side of things before. But when it comes at the end of the day, we both come to realize that it's dogmatism and people's belief systems can be so incredibly divisive. So we can talk about, do you love or like President Trump, or love or like Nancy Pelosi, or the love or like the Dallas Cowboys, and those things we really think are important, but strangely enough, in my experience, they really aren't. At the end of the day, What really matters is values. So our value set is almost completely and totally perfectly aligned, even though our belief systems are not. So when we come from a place of respecting the other person and a lot of empathy, you can make a relationship work despite having very different belief systems.
Well, again, you may not know this, but my wife was a devout Christian, pushing towards young earth creationism. And now she would say that she is not convinced that there actually is a deity.
Wow, that's a big transformation.
She won't use the A word, but that's okay.
Yeah,
she's 95% of the way there. I'm good. But there's hope. There's hope. Not that anything has to change, but one of the things that really shocked my wife, because she knew me and my attitudes towards religion, but when I took her to the first atheist conference and we're sitting at a table, like a 10-top table in a dining hall, and 9 of the people there are bashing religion. It was something that she had never experienced before. She had always experienced the agnostic or atheist as the lone wolf, the one person who had something negative to say. But when you get into an environment where everyone says that it's wrong, you can fuck with your head, which is good, I guess. But
yeah, it certainly is a disruption to be swimming in different waters like that. And I know from my wife, she was a conservative, right-leaning Christian when we first met 10 years ago, and now she's a very liberal Christian and much better, much more worldly, much more informed.
Yeah, I think if everyone was an Anglican or a Episcopalian, I think I have the right ones, I'd probably have to find a different hobby because, they're just trying to show a little love, but I don't know, maybe not. How can people reach you if they want to have you on their podcast? Because you're available for podcasts and maybe talking at a conference at some point in the future. How do they reach you?
Absolutely. You can find me. I was a personal branding guy, and I wrote a book called The Brand Called You. So you can always find me at petermontoya.com as my website address, and email petermontoya@petermontoya.com. I love speaking on humanistic leadership. So that's one of my deep passions, and I speak about it in a way that's different than any other leadership speaker and author does out there. And I also have a group mentoring program called the High Performance Organization. So if you are a business owner, we help you turn your organization from being performing to high performing. You can find that at petermontoya.com.
Fantastic. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being on the Phil Ferguson Show. I appreciate your time very much.
Phil, it was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Jesus had a tough life, boy. I read about that guy. Jesus is the only guy that ever came back from the dead that didn't scare the fuck out of everybody, man. He's the only guy that ever crawled out of a grave where people didn't go, oh, I just saw some fucker crawl out of this grave. Jesus comes back. He doesn't get any pressure. No static. Nobody's upset. He climbs out. He's walking around. Nobody's upset. They can eat with him and everything. It's like, isn't that guy dead? Yeah, but he's real stubborn, man. He won't accept it. Pass the butter. What are they staring at? Yeah, I read it, folks. I read that book. He's on the cross. 30, 40 Christians standing around going, it's a shame that he has to die. And Jesus is going, well, maybe I wouldn't have to. Somebody get a ladder and a pair of pliers. I don't know if Jesus has actually spoken in an audible voice to anybody in about 2,000 years, folks. I think his last words may have been, oh, not the other one, oh, you jerk, no. It may have been his last words. I'm not sure. Yeah, people say, you think Jesus is coming back? Sure. What's it been, 2,000 years? Boy, I sure don't want to dampen anybody's optimism here. It's only 2,000 fucking years. Yeah, he's coming back. He's going to do game shows. We're going to go, Jesus, this is your life. Remember this noise? All right, don't tell me. Give me a second. He's up in heaven right now. They're going, why don't you go back down to earth? Be a symbol of peace and love to the world. Help. And he's going, yeah, sure. Help, huh? Yeah, I'd like to help. Tell him I'll be there as soon as I can play the piano again. Thanks a lot. I mean, the only savior that can use his hand is a fucking
whistle. You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to the show. I really do appreciate you playing along. If you like the show, if you're getting value out of the show, a couple things that you can do for me. One, give it a review somewhere. I know that there's iTunes or the iPod player. There is Stitcher, and I'm sure other platforms have a way for you to give reviews to podcasts. I just don't know what they are. If you know of one, let me know. The other thing you can do is go to patreon.com/Phil and you can donate a couple of dollars per show. I don't really make a whole lot there, but it's a nice thing. It says to me, Phil, the show matters to me and it has value to me. I greatly appreciate that. So either way, if you have a few bucks, patreon.com/Phil, or if you'd like to leave a 5-star review, it's very nice of you, and I appreciate that very much. A long show, I think, definitely over my theoretical hour goal, but we had a lot of stuff to cover. And again, it's just an example of the endless numbers of ways that people and companies can find to sell you things and make investing more complicated than it needs to be. It's already complicated, and there's a lot to understand, but there's business development companies, there's annuities, there's hedge funds, there's all these different ways to have you, and I've got my air quotes up because you can't tell it's a podcast, invest. And often they just end up being ways to separate you from your money. If you're lucky, you get some positive returns out of it. If you're not lucky, you can lose a whole bunch of money. And that's the kind of stuff that, people think they're investing, and they're told that they're investing, and they end up with less money, and then they get scared of investing in the stock market. So maybe that's part of why I talk about it. But it's one of those things that have reasonable expectations, save a lot of money, and then it takes time. If you think someone is offering you something that sounds too good to be true, it probably is. No way to know for sure on my perspective, my point, but often that is the case. So invest carefully and try to understand what you're owning. And if you don't understand it, own something else. If there is a time pressure, for example, someone is telling you, you're going to have to get this now before it sells out, before they close it, before the company figures out how good this is for you. Anything like that, pressure, time-sensitive pressure that you have to buy this, really, honestly, not only should you say no, you should just get up and walk out. There's no time pressure. You have your whole life, and if you think that you're going to buy something that's going to double in a year, if you jump in now, I'm pretty secure in saying that that's probably not going to be how it plays out. You might actually be way better off leaving versus jumping into something you don't understand. So I'm going to wrap up the show here. Got people coming over probably within half an hour to start tearing apart our back patio. It's a nice brickwork, but it's close to 20 years old. And it's got a few spots where it's sinking, and there's some wear and tear on the bricks because apparently they don't last forever, at least not the ones that they bought almost 20 years ago when this patio was built. So they're going to take all that out and make all kinds of noise. So I wanted to get all this done early in the morning before they started. If you have questions about investments, how your investments work, what do you have in your portfolio, you may contact me, Phil@PolarisFinancialPlanning.com. I try to get to all emails. If I don't answer you, you may send a second email. I won't be offended by it, especially if it goes, a week or longer, because sometimes things slip through, and sometimes the spam filter gets a little carried away and puts things in the spam folder that are actual genuine people wanting to ask me questions. So feel free to do some or all of that. Again, you can, of course, I'll have your email. Send your phone number so I can call you when I can fit you in between meetings or appointments with my clients. I'll call you. We can talk. If we decide we want to talk some more, that's cool. You don't owe me anything. It's kind of part of my way of giving back. And I've always started, when I started this business 20 plus years ago, 24 years maybe I've been doing this. It's all about educating people, and a small portion of those people become clients, and that's how I end up making money. But the goal is the education. So don't send your statement, at least, especially not the first email. Wait till we've actually talked. Maybe I can answer your questions over the phone. If I need to see documents or you really want me to look at a document, we can do that after we've had that first, possibly even short conversation, just to make sure you're sending it to the right place. I still do get occasions where people send me things like their retirement portfolio, the account number, their street address. Of course, I have their email and their phone number now. I've even had people send me documents with their social security number on it. Just send me an email with your phone number. Nothing more than that to start with, and we'll go from there. Again, thank you so much for listening. Go to patreon.com/Phil or leave a 5-star review somewhere. And again, no conferences, it looks like, this year in 2020. If one goes ahead and is held, I don't know that I'm going to be there. So probably not going to see you this calendar year. Maybe things get better next year when we have, hopefully, fingers crossed, a new, different president. Until then, ciao.